Hey, everybody. Just wanted to take a minute to be able to connect with you and have a conversation around what's going on in the world right now. And I wanted to do it by sharing a little story with you. Um, Probably about a week before anybody knew about coronavirus or anybody really started to talk about closing schools or shutting down businesses, or even the idea that, people were being directly impacted in the United States, my wife and I had heard some rumblings about the coronavirus in other countries and the anticipation of it coming here. Um, I think that it was hard to justify pulling our kids out of school, like I said, about a week before anybody else really made a move, because we didn't know the validity of the information that we were hearing. And, I want to share a couple of things with you about that. Firstly, is the news itself, right? They've just done a really, really terrible job of covering anything at all, to the point where, as listeners, where maybe our grandparents used to go and listen to the news, like, we don't really know whether what we're hearing is actually truth. Is it reality? Is it not reality? Like, what is it? And so, you hear this term fake news, and I think, the way that I look at it anyway is it's desensitization. So we've been desensitized. And when you listen or hear the news now, it's almost like a hum in the back of your ears, something that you're aware of, but you're not necessarily listening to. And it makes it really difficult to know what to believe, what's true, what isn't. So, essentially, I talked to my wife about it and we were uncertain of what to do. Partnered with my family, my parents in particular, and kind of came to the decision that, we're going to keep a close eye on the news. We're going to watch our local area and we're going to decide whether or not we want to pull the kids out of school. Now, if you're not familiar with our story, we have a 5-year-old child who was diagnosed with leukemia. He was actually diagnosed with cancer over a year and a half ago. So we've been fighting this for quite some time, and none of it's been easy, right? There hasn't been one part of this journey that I would say was something that was easy or worked out well. Not in the least. And there's a lot that goes into it. I have 4 boys, 4 different ages. I have a 16-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, now a 5-year-old in Israel, and a 4-year-old in Eden. And so the disparity in ages, everybody needing to have different things at different times, extremely difficult. The unknown, not really knowing what to anticipate. The first 30 days were by far the worst outside of when Israel was on steroids, because we were left with this, not knowing what was going to happen. And it was very scary. So I can relate to some of the fear that's kind of going around in the world today, just in terms of uncertainty, right? You don't know. And it makes it more difficult when you're not really sure who to trust, or if the information that you're receiving is valid or not. So one of the first things that Rachel and I did was we started looking at the resources, and I think that's helpful. I think that in a time where there's fear and there's a general sense of panic, if you buy into that fear or panic, then it doesn't serve you. And again, I'm gonna kind of create a correlation between what we're talking about now and the experience that I had with Israel, when he was diagnosed with cancer. And yeah, I was broken. I mean, learning that your little baby has cancer, I can't even think of something that would be worse than that. And having to bear that, and as a parent, not being able to remove that from them or take that from them is so difficult. Even now, even today, even after the time that he's spent in, the journey that he's walked, and the fight that he's put forth has been tremendous. And even with that, I still, there's not a day that goes by that I don't wish that I could take this from him. But what I'll share with you is that I got to a point where that just wasn't enough, meaning you get overwhelmed. Like there's a certain level of, I've done this before, I can do it myself. So from the perspective of people that are like, hey, I can beat this thing, it's no problem, like I got this. um, you know, I get it to some degree, right? I think there's a piece of us that wants to believe that we can handle anything. And for those of us that have been on the journey a little bit longer, or for those of us that maybe have experienced the depth of how difficult life can be, it, it's hard. And with Israel, like, it wasn't an option. I didn't have an option to figure it all out. And I phoned in all my resources, and I had everyone that I could think of that could possibly make some kind of an impact on this situation. I had them dialed up and giving me information and telling me what to do. And I always thought I was a strong person, and I utilized all the strength that I had. I mean, listen, many of you that are listening to this right now, some of us went to high school together, some of us college, some of us post grad, some of us know each other from work over the years. So me, I'm not, incapable of handling difficult times, or even being able to defend the people that I love. That's never been an issue for me, um, until my son had cancer. And then it became overwhelming. I couldn't handle it anymore. And I got to a point where it wasn't, the water wasn't at my neck level. It was way above that, over my head. And I just could feel myself drowning. I didn't even know that was possible. And so, there's a couple things I want to say about that. Number one, when Rachel and I first found out about Israel's diagnosis, you know, um, I partnered with the people that were the best in the business, in terms of medicine and science. And, those people helped us to understand what the journey would look like, and we did our homework. I validated the resources and, looked at the alternatives and made the collective decision that this was the best choice, with the highest success rate, to ensure that Israel was alive when it was all said and done. Um, so that's a piece, right? So today, like, there's a lot of craziness. It's the coronavirus, it's everywhere. It's infected and impacted so many different countries. China really destroyed by the coronavirus. Italy, Taiwan. There's a number of different locations, that have been really hurt. Iran, I believe, is another one. And my heart goes out to those countries and to those people, and to us, because we're in the middle of this kind of battle. But my point is that we did research at the very beginning, and looked up the resources that were being utilized. Not all of which was mentioned in the media. As a matter of fact, most of which wasn't mentioned in the media. For a long time, it seemed like people in the media were trying to choose a Democratic or Republican side. And I got to tell you, when I'm dealing with my son's life, I'm not interested in politics at all, in any way, shape, or form. And so, that it might be even difficult for some people to hear, but I guarantee you, if somebody that you love is in jeopardy, like, you're going to do whatever you can to take care of them. And you'll take help from a Republican, a Democrat, a white person, a black person, a yellow, purple, like, it doesn't matter. You'll take help from anyone when it comes to saving the people that you love. So that was really clear, right? And you can't make those type of assessments or decisions without a clear head. You got to have a clear mind. And I wasn't there right away. Like, I don't judge people, because I don't think that, when we were first given this information, I honestly, I wasn't there. Wasn't able to look at what was going on and say, oh yeah, no, this makes perfect sense. Like, I was panicking, and I was trying to control the panic, and it wasn't working. And so, I'll get to what kind of settled all that in, towards the end here. But, I think for this case in point, like, do your research, right? Uh, y- Look at where the information is coming from, so you know whether or not it's true and it's valid. And, if you need help, like, seek out people that are really good at researching this. But I can promise you that, looking within the medical community and looking within the scientific community are very good resources to be able to get the proper information without being misled. The second thing that comes to mind, is the idea behind, uh, I'm really strong and I'm not going to get this. And that's another, misconception, right? So, the thing is it doesn't affect, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And you're not impacted by something until it impacts you directly. So whether it's going on an inexpensive vacation, or, partying with your friends, or it could be even like hanging out with other people in your neighborhood because you're bored, or, maybe you've never had to really watch your kids. Maybe they've gone to family members' houses or to daycare, or they go to school, and so now, like, they're at home and you're at home, and it's like, what do I do? Well, let's get them out of the home. It can't really be that bad, but, like, it is, and the issue is that, when it's two-sided, right? So on one end you have the philosophy of, like, hey, we're overdoing this thing, we're giving it too much. And so let's, like, I like to look at it at, like, best worst case scenario, right? So we're putting out too much effort to, utilize social distancing and isolation, and, some of these other methodologies that are being asked of us, even shutting down the state to some degree, right? um, what's the worst case scenario in something like that? Somebody might say, well, the stock market crashes, or, the financial world as we know it is uprooted, or, I don't know. We could, there's no toilet paper, right, in the supermarkets. I mean, there's a lot of different, philosophies as to what's happening and what's going on. But, you know, the reality is that we can always come back from all of those things. Every one of those situations can be reset, and if this was all a glorified hoax that took you 2 weeks to be away from your workplace, to be home, to watch TV, to get on the internet, to, maybe FaceTime people that you love, or spend time with your families. uh, that's the worst case scenario. Like, that doesn't really sound so bad to me. So it's confusing, when you hear people complaining about it. I don't really understand that. And again, I'm not trying to judge anyone at all. I think there's a lot of different theories and philosophies going on about, what this is and why it's happening. And, best case, worst case scenario, right? So worst case scenario, it's all nonsense, but everyone's alive and well and okay. So, let's flip to the other side. Worst case scenario, you have people that have diabetes or hypertension, people that are immunocompromised, like Israel. And God, if you only knew the journey, man, if I could just give you a snapshot of what that journey's been like for my family, and how difficult and how painful, and what the struggle's been like. It's been terrible. It's been terrible. I wish everybody could get, a glimpse into the day in the life of what my 5-year-old has to go through. You would never consider putting him in danger. Like, you just wouldn't, and or yourself for that matter, really truly, right? So, when we look at worst case scenario, maybe you don't die and you get coronavirus. I mean, listen, maybe you don't even get sick. That's an option. Um, but you pass it on to someone else who passes it on to somebody else, and it becomes a situation like this family, who just lost 3 or 4 of their like siblings, right? Maybe mom and dad, sister and brother, whatever the scenario was, but they lost 4 family members. It's difficult enough to lose one person. Can you imagine if you lost 4? And these are people you love and care about. Take a second to just look at that and think about the people that you love and the people that you care about. Like, would you really be willing to risk that? And the whole idea of this, social distancing is to slow it down, to get it to almost come to a halt. And, what the US has done is looked at other countries that have had success, or on the other side, like Italy as an example, have not been successful. And what did they do that worked, and, what didn't work? And, this is what we're going to implement to ensure that we're successful. And it makes me sad to hear people arguing. And when I listen or I read their arguments, especially on social media, a lot of people are taking either a like very much like a political stance. Like, you don't sound like you are even using your own thoughts. It just sounds like you're speaking from the political, uh, like whatever your objective is. It's like a premeditated situation where you want this to be the outcome, so you're going to speak this language because, this is how you're going to create being able to honor or recognize or shoot down and discredit the parties at hand. So you're going to use a particular language that's going to create that. And it's not about that. It's about people living and dying. It's about your mother and your father and your sister and your brother. And in our instances, it's about a 5-year-old boy. And I can't tell you how many parents out there, countless parents, that are dealing with a battle that most people could never even face. You're putting their kids at risk. Why? That doesn't even make sense. So you can go to Cancun. I went to Cancun. It wasn't that glorious, and I don't remember most of it. And I got a lot of fraternity brothers that'll tell you the same thing. The reality is that that's not the reality. This is an opportunity for something different. This is an opportunity to put aside all of our differences and, to be willing to walk in this together. And if it's not real, praise God. Like, if it's not real, then all those people are alive. But if it is real, you really want to be the cause of creating more death? One death is too many. Tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of deaths, and maybe even millions if we're not careful. You don't want that on your shoulders. You don't want to have to bear that. And so, just keep that in mind when you're making these choices to go out. Like, is it really worth it, to do that? What am I putting at risk that goes outside of myself? As human beings, like, we've been taught differently, but the truth of our nature is that we're inclined to live selflessly. We're inclined to live and stand for other people. Like, that's what we're designed to do, regardless of what you see on social media. That's the true nature of our being.